Hi guys, today we're talking about possibly the most confusing book I've ever read in my life. I still can't wrap my head around it, so I would love to talk to you about this today so that I can try to understand it more. And this is The Gunslinger by Stephen King, book number 1 in the Dark Tower series. So today we are deep diving into an oddly confusing but also very cosmic world. And let me tell you, this book is a ride. This is a journey. If you've read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, so please leave those in the comments. However, if you haven't read this book, don't worry, there are no spoilers in this video. So I would love to hear from you after watching this review whether or not you feel like you might read it. Stephen King is a very popular author. People talk about him as though he is the king of horror. However, this is not necessarily a horror book at all. It's like a multitude of different genres. There's fantasy elements in here, there was a little bit of sci-fi dabbled in there. There's also Western fiction in this book. Yeah, this book has a multitude of different genres. If you've ever wondered what a post-apocalyptic Western cosmic world looks like, then this book might be for you. But also, that is very random and very specific. So let's jump into my review of The Gunslinger. Firstly, I want to give a huge thank you to those of you who chose this for the April book club. If you weren't aware, on my channel we run a free book club every month. All you need to do is read the book for that month, and then we host a live stream on the final Saturday of every month to discuss it. Can I just say, that live stream was so insanely helpful. Prior to that live stream, I didn't really know what my thoughts or opinions were on this book. I felt so conflicted and so confused. But listening to other people sharing their thoughts and opinions really helped me to come to my own conclusions. So thank you so much if you joined in on that live stream or if you shared your opinions on The Gunslinger with me. I really appreciate it and you helped me out a bunch. And now I'm able to make this review because I do have some articulate thoughts on it, which I didn't have previously. So The Gunslinger is the first book in the Dark Tower series. It was originally published in the 1980s, and the entire thing basically felt like a really weird, strong acid trip. I've never felt anything like it in my life. And from the first page, you feel that. Now I've got to say, the first line of this book is iconic. I love a book that has such a strong, powerful first line. This one definitely does. It gave me chills. And it's so simple as well. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. Sorry, but how basic but how powerful. What a perfect start to a book. So this book is actually set into 5 different parts. Almost like each one is a short story following the gunslinger Roland on his path to finding the man in black. That's the whole purpose of this book. And each short story is very different. Different things happen in different ones. They all feel like they could have been taken from different novels. That first part, which was actually my least favourite, compared to the final part, which was my favourite, they feel like completely different books. The only consistent thing in them is that it's following the gunslinger. It's the gunslinger who is like the main character. But in terms of like the genre, the themes, the actual plot, the other characters, the locations, they are so widely different. And I think that's why this book is so confusing, because different parts are just so different. I struggled to process what was going on because it was just like a mix of everything. One thing that I will say about this book, now there's no denying Stephen King is a fantastic author. I mean, that's just a fact. You don't need me to tell you that. However, I don't think that this was one of his strongest books. There are definitely better books with a better writing style than this. Now, I suppose the main thing that I didn't enjoy about this book, so the writing style is, great because it's Stephen King. However, with this book, there's barely any context. There's no world building, and he doesn't explain anything. So it depends what type of reader you are. Now, I don't like people spoon feeding me information. I don't need an author to tell me absolutely everything in the most of specific terms. I do like a little bit of interpretation. I like an author who gives me enough information to set the foundations, but leaves something open to interpretation so that I can visualize it in my mind, how I perceive the story and how I perceive the environment and the characters and the plot. However, Stephen King just didn't give me any information in this book, and I think that's why I was so confused. Other than the fact that it was like set in this western barren desert, and I suppose he describes the town of Tull pretty well, which is in the first part. He describes nothing else. I don't understand what the plot was. Obviously, I understand the basis that he's trying to find the man in black, but I don't understand who the man in black is, why he's trying to find the man in black, how Roland ended up in this barren desert in the first place, how he ended up in Tull. I don't know his backstory very well. There was little parts about his backstory when he was younger, but then it doesn't really join up to where he is today. I just feel like there was a load of context missing that I would have highly benefited from, and that wouldn't have made this so confusing for me. I don't know, maybe I'm just dumb. Maybe I'm not intelligent enough to read this book and understand what was going on. Maybe I need to reread it and pick up on things that I might have overlooked the first time through. That's probably most likely, I hope. Or maybe I am just thick. So that's my main part of this book that I didn't enjoy. And I think it's just because I needed more context. I needed to know what was going on. I don't think he set the foundations enough for me personally. But that is based on the type of reader that I am. Every reader is different. Every reader likes a different thing. But here's where things get interesting for me. So in the second part, we are introduced to the boy of Jake Chambers. So he is a boy from our world who somehow ends up in this kind of like multiverse situation with Roland. His relationship with Roland is one of the emotional anchors to this story. It's so powerful, it's really detailed, it's so in-depth. I really liked the meanings that those two characters had for each other, the way that they perceived each other. And there's a real tragic tension between the two. Jake is vulnerable, scared, and looking for a father figure. But Roland, on the other hand, well, he's too consumed by his mission and by his quest to offer that enough to Jake. It's almost like he's battling between trying to be vulnerable and love Jake, but also seeing his higher motives in trying to find the man in black. And there's a decision that Roland makes later on in the book regarding Jake. I won't spoil anything, but ouchie wowa, that hurt. It hit me hard. And again, I don't really understand why. I don't really understand what led to that decision or why he needed to do it. I know that he spoke to an oracle and that he was following a prophecy, so I think that that is the reason behind his decision. But it was one of the few times in this book where I really felt something for Roland. Even if it did make me like him a little less, I wouldn't say he's a very likeable character at all, but it was nice to feel something for him. Now let's talk about that ending, so that final part of the book, which was by far my favourite part. So the ending of the book is not the epic showdown that you would normally expect. Again, the pacing is quite slow. It's not action-packed, it's not complex. However, there was something really tranquil about it, I found. Something quite beautiful about that last part. Implemented into that part is a full-blown conversation about existence, time, the nature of the universe, infinity, and it was just so cosmic and ethereal. It captivated me. That whole part just got me hooked. I think it was a beautifully written chapter. We're essentially pulled into a vision with Roland, or maybe it's more of like a dream, where we get this explanation that all of reality is basically like layered onions of worlds. It's like infinity stacked on infinity, and time is continuous. It's forever going, the universe is continuous, there's no end. And it was talking about how Roland, despite this big, powerful quest and mission that means so much to him, he's just a speck in this infinite universe. This part I absolutely loved. It was by far my favourite part of the book. It gave me chills. It made me think deeply about the world, about what matters to me, but also that I am just a speck and that there's bigger things going on, basically. It kind of put into perspective for me that yes, I do have stresses in my life and problems that are very real for me, just as everybody has things going on in their lives which are very real for them and matter to them. That is so important. But also, in the wider world and the wider universe, these things are also very, very small. So it just helps to kind of look at things from those different perspectives. I just found it a really powerful part of the book and by far my favourite part. It made the entire book feel like it had a deeper purpose, which I hadn't felt until that point. So for that reason, I absolutely loved the ending of this book and that final part, even though it wasn't really an ending, it was more of an introduction to the Dark Tower series as a whole. There wasn't really an ending to this book. But that last part was so powerful, it made me think so deeply, and it made me quite intrigued to see what else happens in the series. So that ending was so powerful, even if the journey to getting there was a bit messy at the earlier parts of the book. So let's talk about my least favourite part of the book, which I mentioned was part 1, and that was set in Tull, aka some kind of weird pit stop from hell. I don't really understand what was going on there. So Roland arrives in this dusty, mysterious town full of secrets, really interesting characters actually. That is one aspect of this part that I did enjoy, was all the different characters and getting to know a little bit about the characters in the town. There's also some subplots in this part which involve a resurrection, a possessed demon lady, and the whole town ending up in chaos and violence, essentially. But this whole part did feel bloated to me. I understand that there were kind of like religious themes underlying it. However, I think it could have been done in a different way that felt more important to the story. I don't feel like Tull was necessarily needed, in my opinion. It felt quite bloated. I just needed more explanation in regards to the importance of Tull. Was it brutal? Yes. Was it harrowing and emotional? Yes. Was it needed? No. It definitely added a dark edge to the story, but for me it slowed the pacing right down and just added to my confusion. So where do I land on the Gunslinger? After so much thought and reflection and help from other people's opinions, what are my final viewpoints? Yes, this book is confusing. There were parts to this book I did not feel were necessary. This is a short book and I feel like parts could have been taken out of it because they just didn't feel needed. However, it is also weirdly brilliant in places. You cannot deny there are some parts of this book that are just so powerful and are just so good. It's pleasing in places and frustrating in others. It is such a mix. The prose is beautiful in parts, but very dusty and a bit odd in other parts. Roland is not a hero that you root for, he's not necessarily likeable, but he is compelling and I'm intrigued by his quest. And that ending with the wild metaphysical monologue, that was what really saved the book for me. So the prose, I think there's gorgeous writing, there's cosmic themes that really stick with you and make you think. There's memorable characters who are quite likeable as well, like Jake. He carried the whole story for me, was my favourite character by far. And it had a very strong ending. However, the cons, very confusing plot with a lack of world building and context. There's some pacing issues. The whole section of the town of Tull I didn't really feel like was necessary unless I'm just missing the point, but at the same time I need Stephen King to give me the context so that I understand the point. And also Roland's coldness can be quite alienating, making him unlikable and frustrating in parts. So if you are into stories that blend a mixture of genres, make you think deeply, but also don't spoon feed you any information, then The Gunslinger might be worth your time. It's only a short book as well. But if you're wanting something a bit more straightforward that has a very clear plot, then I would recommend a different book by Stephen King first. So based on this, I was umming and ahhing as to whether or not I'm going to continue the series. I've had so many of you tell me that actually the second book is a lot better and a bit more clear cut in terms of what the plot actually is. So based on that, because I definitely didn't hate this book at all, and there were parts of it that I really enjoyed, I think I am going to read the next book in the series. This is a long series, but I am intrigued with the next one, so I think I'm going to pick it up, give it a go, and then make my decision from that point onwards as to if I'm going to read the whole series. So, if you've read The Gunslinger, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions, so please leave those in the comments. Were there parts of this video that you agree with me on, but were there also parts of it that you disagree with me on? Because I feel like with a book like this, everybody's going to think about it differently. Everybody's going to pick up on something different. You might have noticed something in the part with Tull that I completely overlooked, and vice versa. I might have mentioned some things today that you didn't consider. Either way, I would love for us to chat about this in the comments. It's such an interesting book and an interesting topic. If you haven't read The Gunslinger, do you feel like you will, based on this review? Does it sound like something that's up your street? I would love to hear from you in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you like my content and you want to see more from me, then please subscribe because it's free and it means that you'll see my videos easier. Why am I still holding up the book? I'd also love to give a huge thank you to the members who are supporting my channel. It means the absolute world to me and you are so appreciated. Thank you so much. If you want access to cool perks or you'd like to support the channel in any way, then please check out the channel memberships and hopefully there'll be something on there that takes your fancy. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.